Hello, friends, and welcome to our Friday evening monk chat. Here, offered to you live from Empty Cloud Monastery. So we are live for now, and tonight we're joined by a special guest who will be staying for quite some time. It's Aya Sobana. So yes, please, Aya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I have been a bhikkhuni for 19 years, going on 20. I ordained at Dambulla in Sri Lanka. I trained for some time with Bhante Gunaratana at West Virginia. And then for the most recent decade and a half, I've been out in California with the Dhamma Dharini community.
Sadhu. Yeah, so it's a pleasure that we're joined by you, Aya. So thank you for joining us for this, for your presence and your wisdom. And so we'll be doing our normal program of answering questions to the best of our ability here, either until the clock indicates that it's time we stop or until the questions run out. So if you have any questions related to the teachings of the Buddha or questions related to meditation or to monastic life related to Buddha, Dhamma, or Sangha, then you're welcome to leave those, and then we will try our best to get to those, to get to all of them before we run out for the session ends. And so usually at this time, we'll render homage to the Buddha before beginning, and then Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammam Sangham Namassami. And so we say hello to some of the people joining. We see Richard from Bolivia. Hope you're doing well, Richard, as well as Cows, our friend, and Joseph. Hope you're well, Joseph, also, as well as Jenny, maybe, and Sean. Hello, Sean. Bhumika. And Laura, Jody, and anyone else who might be watching silently without leaving questions. And so then we have a question from Richard here who says, parents are very important. Buddhism, I'm sorry, I think this is a typo. So parents are very important in Buddhism as they are mentioned, for example, in the mundane right view. So how can we help someone who has the wrong view that there is no mother and father? An example of that wrong view that I see in myself from time to time is as follows. The Petavatu says a beautiful phrase on the relation parents to children. About the children, it says, they came uninvited and left without permission, in relation to a newborn child who later on dies. So my wrong view lies in the part they came uninvited, because from time to time I think that or hear others say that we are here because our parents, and then we make them responsible for all of our misery. If I could help me and help others to make strong this right view on parents, please. Thank you very much. So asking about right view on parents and maybe relating that to teachings on children being.
Yes.
Yeah, so Aya, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, the mundane wrong view, there is no mother and father, is something that on its face to somebody who doesn't have any background can be rather confusing. Because how could an ordinary person with any kind of common sense at all could say, obviously there's mother and father. So what are we to make out of that? And one way that it was explained that I found persuasive is that the idea that one does not owe any debt of gratitude towards mother and father. That in particular in the previous traditions, when a person passes away, if they are reborn in a good plane, in a heavenly plane, then there's an idea that the merits that the children do help to extend the amount of time that they have in the heavenly realm. And so it becomes, in that system, really important to have children and for your children to survive. So there will be somebody around to do merits for you in order to help you to be able to stay in heaven and not fall to the lower realm. This is not the Buddhist idea. However, the Buddha did strongly emphasize that the parents gave us life. And when we were helpless, the parents did so much to take care of us that the very first example that we experienced in this world to know what kindness is or what compassion is what we would have experienced from our parents. And so in that way, there's a responsibility as long as our parents live to care them, to respect them, to honor them, to love them. Then if a person doesn't believe in rebirth, if they have the materialistic annihilationist view that after a person dies, they're gone, there's nothing there anymore, then that kind of person would think that they don't owe anything to their parents because they think when the parents passed, it's just finished. And the Buddha emphasized that certainly there is another life, and it can be possible that beings, if there's still attachment, they still can be reborn into a place that they can be aware of us. One particular level in the Buddhist cosmology is if a person is unfortunate to be born at what's called the hungry ghost level, that is something that's within the Kama Loka. It's within the same world sphere that we are in. But a person who's a hungry ghost, they're symbolized as somebody who's starving. They have the swollen belly. That's somebody who's starving, but their throat is pencil thin and they're not able to swallow. So if you try to give them nourishment, they're not able to swallow the nourishment. So it's very difficult for somebody in that realm to emerge out of that realm. But one of the things that they can do is they can be aware of humans. And if your relative or someone in that realm saw that you remembered them, that you wish for their happiness, their welfare, for their liberation, that you wish for their welfare, or that you make offerings and you dedicate or do virtuous things and dedicate the result of your virtue for the welfare of this hungry ghost, then they would rejoice. They would say, "Oh, my family remembers me, my relatives remember me." Oh, they feel such happiness, such an uplift. And that mudita that they experience is a meritorious deed. It's one of the few good deeds that a person at that level is able to do, is to rejoice in knowing that they've been remembered. Now, of course, we might not necessarily see it in such a literal kind of way, but for me, feeling my karmic connection to the web of life and to the beings who have gone before me, feeling that they've not disappeared and that the virtues that I do and whatever I'm capable of as far as giving happiness to others by sharing merits, by giving people something to rejoice in. If they would look at me and feel glad to see me because there's something in me that brings up that gladness, then that's really uplifting, and it creates a kind of a synergy between those who I've known in the past who have left their mortal plane in the form that I knew them, including my parents. On the other hand, there is a kind of a danger in the family relationship, which is being excessively attached to one's family. And so part of the nature of the sensual pleasures in this kama realm is the attached or the overly attached love that somebody can have for their family, especially between parents and children. It's normal and probably necessary for a parent of an infant to feel the bond of attachment. You know, there's something that happens, perhaps a person could be very ambivalent about having a child, and then like something happens when the newborn comes in. That's it. This is, and the bond is created, and that's what makes it possible for the parent to do the unbelievably extensive amount of exertion that they have to do in order to be a high quality parent and to do all the things that a child needs as they go through the different stages of life. But if you met a parent and the child is 25 or 30 years old and they're still attached the way they would be to a small child, you would say that was sick and there was something really like psychologically unhealthy about that. They have to let go. And the teaching about the infant is to recognize that every relationship that you have in life that you count on, that you depend on, it becomes, in effect, part of your identity. I'm the child of my parents, I'm the brother of my siblings, I'm the spouse of my spouse, I'm the parent of my children. And that whole package is like a constellation, and I'm like a planet that's within the gravitational field of all of those other beings, and it becomes an identity. But that's not our true identity. And we need to be prepared to lose everything, to lose our loved ones. And the verse about they came uninvited and not without permission is teaching that sooner or later, whether it happens when they're a little baby or when they're 85 years old, sooner or later, there's going to be death and there will be a separation, there will be a parting. If we can love with an open hand and not with grasping, then we'll really realize the moral of that story, and we'll be able to quickly overcome the grief and loss of losing a loved one without becoming so traumatized by it that it becomes a wound and we go on for many decades there being psychologically crippled because we don't know how to let go of that attachment. There's a lot of things that can be said about parenting, but that's something. You may add something?
Oh, I think that's wonderful. Maybe I'll just add something briefly that you didn't touch on to cover one more angle on it, but I think that was really, really good. Is one thing that's come, Richard, you mentioned having certain wrong views about parents, and one thing that I don't know if this is implicit in your question, but it's something that I could see coming up for someone. And there was a metaphor, an image that came to me at one point when talking about parents and our relationship to parents in Buddhism. So before I say it, I just have to say that this is not meant to be offensive, because one time I was actually explaining this to someone and they found it disappointing. So it's actually not meant to be an offensive simile or anything. But it just came to me as an explanation, is that when someone is trying to cross the border into the US, they have these people called coyotes who essentially help someone cross from the southern border from Mexico to the US. And so the coyote is a person who they basically guide you illegally across the border. And when someone comes across the border illegally, right, then you might say, well, they're the ones who chose to do it. It was their choice. It was the result of their own actions. And like, they actually had to walk across the border themselves. So in this idea of they come unasked and they leave unasked, you might be thinking, well, it was my karma to be reborn as a human. So my parents didn't really have much to do with it. And they're not really anything special to me. It was just my karma. But if you think about the image of the coyote, though, is that although the person does have to have the willingness and they have to put forth the effort and they have to make the choices and put in the conditions themselves to get across the border, they couldn't do it without someone who actually guided them, who was like the doorway to lead them across. And they would be forever grateful to someone. Or like, for example, if you were crossing a dangerous flood, even though it's your choice to get on the boat, you would be forever grateful to the person who was steering the boat, who, because of them, they saved your life. So although it was your choice, you had to actually get to the place, you had to actually go across the shore, you had to choose to do that. But there was someone who made it possible for you to actually pass the doorway, so to speak, right? And that's our parents. So although it's our karma to be reborn as humans, it wasn't, our parents, they didn't give us the karma, but they are the doorway through which we can enter the human realm. And so we should be forever grateful. It's like the person who steers the boat or the person who guides someone, then the person who gets across, they would be forever grateful to that person for allowing them to execute that choice, allowing them to fulfill that wish. So that's something that can be helpful when you're thinking about how does the idea of beings kind of roaming in accordance with their own actions, how does that work with the responsibility to parents who you might think, well, I'm the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma. And then that might make you feel, maybe I could see how maybe some people might feel like there's some kind of tension with that and the teaching on the parents. But I don't think there is. And I think that image can be helpful. If in case that was something on your mind, if that's useful, then offer that.
Or that in addition to taking a human birth, there can be a karma that chooses you to land in that particular family with those particular parents.
Yeah.
There's something kind of useful in the Vedic or in the Hindu tradition about thinking of rebirth as a learning experience. So if you still have something that you need to learn, then the karma brings you to the place where you can learn that lesson. And so whatever the challenges or difficulties or complaints that we might have about our family of birth, it can possibly be because there's something here that we needed to learn about in order to graduate to the next level.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So moving on. Looks like we have a question from Joseph. Okay. So Joseph was asking about based on something he heard. So here's the question. So for context, Ajahn Brahm said that for Upekkha, he didn't really like the term equanimity as a translation of Upekkha and preferred something closer to contentment. When you say that connected to a scene that you saw from a series on the life of Jesus, specifically a scene where we see him healing the sick. A man comes to Jesus with a broken leg that hasn't healed properly and has gone green. It has gangrene. You can smell him before you see him. The people around Jesus are visibly distressed at the presence of the man who is angry and irritable. And Jesus, however, gets up and calmly walks over to the man and welcomes him into the space with friendliness. Looking into his eyes, he touches the man's arm and heals him. The man rejoices in awe, and Jesus laughs with him in apathetic joy, eyes glimmering. The man breaks his crutch, saying thank you, and runs back to from the way he came, just smiles as he looks on, content, and returns to the circle of care. Okay, now here's the question. Can you see how all four Brahma-viharas arise in sequence in this interaction? Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha. Is this process view of the practice the right direction to take the practice?
Well, metta is very often mentioned by itself, and the other three aspects of the Brahma-vihara practice are very often mentioned as a set. Metta is the most universal. The important feature of metta in comparison to the rest of the set is that metta does not change in any circumstance, any situation, or any qualities of the other person, whether the other person is lovable or difficult to love, whether they're good or bad, or whether they're having a streak of good luck or a streak of bad luck. Metta is just metta. So even if you take up the training that's given in the path of purification of doing metta for the four persons, for oneself, for the dear lovable person, for the neutral person, and for the enemy or the difficult person, one thing that a beginner would notice is that the quality of metta seems to change depending on the different types of persons. But after they have cultivated and developed and become really skillful with the practice of metta, the metta is just the same, regardless of which kind of person it is. Then the compassion is the natural response of kindness when it is aware of dukkha or pain or suffering in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh described karuna as being a skill. So a person who has the skill to alleviate the suffering in a situation is said to be an expert in karuna or in sympathy. So it's not necessarily, it will certainly not be considered to be compassionate if you see the suffering in the world and then you become anxious and miserable because of the suffering outside, and then you really, really want that suffering to go away because you want to feel comfortable. That's not what compassion is. Buddhism is not necessarily prescribing that we would do, that we would all become social workers and spend our days and nights doing good deeds to relieve the suffering in the world. But we can be social workers. We can be Buddhist social workers if that's our choice. And any time, whether it's once in a while or whether it's our life vocation to heal the sick or work with people in distress, then arousing compassion means visualizing the recovery and the wellness of that person. So instead of focusing on the pain and misery, we focus on the potential for the transformation to bring that misery to its end. And then the person can experience the bliss of being free from that misery. And so in that way, compassion is something that is an uplifting and energizing practice. It's not a practice that causes us to feel drained and worn out because we've been internalizing the pain and the suffering that we see outside. And mudita is associated with being the opposite of jealousy, so that when you see the success of another, one can appreciate, rejoice, acknowledge, and get the sense of upliftment from wishing that the person would be able to not lose what they've gained, especially for spiritual success. A person who's jealous or who is suffering from any of the varieties of aversion, you could see that somebody else has a success, and then we sort of like try to find the dark fault. Like, they got some good luck, but they're not doing it right, and it's not going to last, something like that. But that's obviously the opposite of mudita. Mudita also can have a bit of a as you could say, a near enemy of mudita, which would be kind of like being possessive or having some kind of like a ownership interest, or like our team, like if your home team wins the Super Bowl or something like that, and that you're rejoicing in that has got a bit of identification and ego involvement in it. I appreciate the comment about upekkha being not just something which is dull and uncaring. That's not what upekkha is about. But upekkha is definitely about calmness. And upekkha evolves into realizing an imperturbable state, which can be a spiritual accomplishment when one becomes disenchanted with sensual pleasures, disenchanted with gain and loss, and with all of those other worldly kinds of things, that then a person is no longer emotionally triggered by the ups and downs of life, and you can see the ups and downs of life as if from a distance, without being reactive in that way. And that is an important part of what upekkha is. So to be calm and neutral is an advantage. I might compare that to the doctor. A skillful doctor does still have human emotions, but when they're treating a patient, they got to put their emotions on hold in order to be really objective in understanding how to diagnose and how to treat that patient and to make the best choices toward that patient. And so you wouldn't want to be treated by a doctor who was reacting to their emotions while deciding what the course of treatment should be. Then you also do want the doctor to care. And so there's two different things, but there's that objectivity. And we need equanimity in order to see the truth and realize liberation. So it's a very important practice. Yes, you can see the story, the Jesus story that you gave. That's true. Bhantaji gives the story of parents. When they conceive the child and the baby's still in the womb, they don't know how it's going to turn out, whether that person is going to be smart or stupid, good or bad, difficult or easy, beautiful or ugly. They have no idea how it's going to turn out, but that just loves them. And they just wish for their happiness. Okay, so that's metta. Then when the baby's born and is helpless and is crying and so on, then the parents have the skill to figure out what the trouble is and to take care of it. That's compassion. Then when that child says dada or mama or starts to walk or goes to school and gets a prize at school or engages in their activities at school, and the parents feel so proud and happy because they see the maturing of the skills and the talents of that child. And then later, that child wants to go to college in a different city, and they want to marry somebody who's not the person you would have chosen, or take up a job that's not the job that you would have chosen. And at that time, the parent has to practice equanimity, knowing that young adult is the owner of their own karma and needs to make their own choices.
Sounds good. So let me just double check if there weren't any questions. Okay, it looks like that was it. Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Yes, he's saying greetings.
Mm-hmm.
And then our next question is from Jenny, who says, has the Abrahamic God ever been interpreted as the Mahabrahman by Buddhist texts?
I'm not sure that the Buddhist text met the Abrahamic God. They met the Greek gods, and they made the Greek gods into bodhisattvas. As helpers or beings with personalities, and they brought out this idea of like a pantheon of multiple Buddhas and bodhisattvas, sort of possibly being something that was picked up or blended from the early exposure to the Greek pantheon of Greek gods. And I also think that in the Zoroastrian religion, what's the name of the goddess? In
Zoroastrian? I'm not sure.
Not sure.
Ahura Mazda.
Guru Mata. So
Ahura Mazda.
So this there's a figure from ancient Persian religions that in the iconography of Buddhism became the Maitreya Buddha.
Hmm.
And so there's something as far as the visual art, how that became carried over. But certainly you can see the similarities between the Mahabrahma and the Abrahamic God in terms of being the creator, the one who's all-powerful, all-knowing, all-seeing, the one who's the unvanquished, who's the conqueror, and which direction the influence went, or whether they came up spontaneously the same. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, one thing that comes to mind for me is that depending on which theology of Abrahamic God you're looking at, they could be closer sometimes even to Sakka in Buddhist cosmology, like in the in parts of the Hebrew Bible or the what's by Christians called the Old Testament. You have scenes where God is declaring wars or even seen walking around or whatever, and that would be closer to Sakka, which is like Indra in more commonly known as Indra. And so in that case, Saka was a war god in Vedic cosmology, similar to, and he was a storm god, similar to the original Abrahamic god. Originally was a storm god, and then, but in terms of, and then how the philosophy evolves, though, then of course God becomes, when you start looking in the clouds, you don't see any God there. So then you start seeing he's more and more abstract. And then mystics maybe have experiences, and so the notion of God kind of expands, and in that sense, definitely it's closer to Mahabrahma. And not so long ago here, someone was asking about the Brahmajala Sutta and the stories in there of the Buddhist explanation of the creator, stories of the creator deities. So in that sense, I'm not familiar with Buddhists in ancient times conversing with Jewish or Christian theology. But you do have Buddhists conversing with nearly equivalent theology, as I already mentioned. You have the idea of an eternal creator deity, and in the very first sutta of the Sutta Pitaka, so the collection of the Buddhist discourses, the discourses of the Buddha and his disciples, the very first one is called the Brahmajala Sutta, Digha Nikaya number 1, and the Buddha goes through 62 wrong views, and he kind of talks about how these are essentially the message of the sutta being that people have particular conditioned sensory experiences, and then based off of those sensory experiences, they form theories and ideas which actually go beyond what the experience itself was. So like, for just a basic example, is that imagine that you see a light, and then you think that you've seen an eternal God, but actually you've just had a temporary conditioned experience. So your interpretation goes beyond what the experience itself was. So in the sutta, one of the views that's presented is the view that there is a creator, an eternal creator deity who is all powerful and so on. And the way that this is explained is not how you might think. The Buddha says that in Buddhist cosmology, the universe expands and contracts. So right now, the universe is expanding, right? And that's, according to modern scientists, that's the prevailing theory, is that the universe is expanding. And then in Buddhist cosmology, that's part of the stage of the universe, and then eventually the universe will start collapsing again and close in, and then it will expand again. And it's been going on like that for a long time, very long time. And so the Buddha says that when the universe is collapsing, basically, beings can't really, the diversity of rebirths that can happen is collapsed because there's not so many possibilities. And then as it starts expanding again, then beings start being reborn according to their karma. And one particular being is reborn in the place of Mahabrahma, of the great Brahma. And they're reborn there. And so they're all alone because the universe has not expanded yet. So beings are not being yet, they're not yet filling the stations of samsara, so to speak. So this one being is there. And then they think, oh, if only they had company. And then when they have that thought, as the universe expands, beings are reborn below them, filling the host of Brahma. And they think that because of their wishing, they created the beings. And then they tell the beings that, and the beings see that the Brahma was there first. And so then they believe the Brahma, like, oh, you've created us, because they don't remember. And so then you have this setup where the Brahma thinks that they've created the beings, and the beings believe that they're created by Brahma. And then one of those beings dies and is reborn as a human, and they become a spiritual practitioner, and they recollect their past lives. And then they remember that they were created by this eternal deity who created all beings. And so then they go about declaring that theory and declaring that they've experienced it. But actually, all they've experienced, they didn't actually experience that, right? But they believe what they've experienced and have a theory about it. And so in that sense, you could say that Buddhism it kind of offers an explanation of where does the theory of the creator God come from? It says that essentially it's a misinterpretation of the way that the universe was unfolding, and it was mistakenly taken to be created. So there is that there, but it's not directly a response to the Abrahamic God. It's more a response to creationist theology, kind of in general.
Oh, well, this can be taken in a way that's really appreciating the Buddha's commitment to truth and his penetrating insight into human psychology and the way that beliefs are created and formed. Alternatively, it can be interpreted in a more cynical way of saying that Buddhism was competing with the other faith traditions and was creating stories that were mocking and criticizing the other faith traditions for the sake of competition. It certainly is true that there is the kind of a tone of, to me, I think it's a kind of a gentle, humorous tone in many of the stories that are told in the sutras about the Brahma realm and about the gods. But I also think that it's a really important contemplation from what we're concerned about is we want to protect, the Buddha said that one should protect, preserve the truth. And so the characteristic of the truth is not only is it something that you could prove by some argument and evidence, either it exists or it doesn't exist, but it's also the question whether holding this truth leads us onwards towards the liberation from rebirth and samsara. Does it lead us onwards towards escaping from all of the taints of grasping and clinging? Does it lead to liberation? And so then a lot of things that are true are they're still true, but they're trivial because they're not relevant and pertinent to that goal, to that purpose. But then the truths like the idea of the creator God. Perhaps if the Buddha had done the test and found that the belief in the creator God was something that leads one to liberation from the cycle of rebirth, then he would have taught it, just as he said about the idea of the self, which is actually kind of related to the later Vedic traditions. They said that Atman is Brahman, that there you have within yourself this soul idea, and if you can discover and get in touch with the Atman within oneself, that's kind of like the window whereby you can see Brahma, that you can come in touch with the highest level of the divinity. And that the Buddha did say that if that theory led to liberation, I would be teaching that theory. But it doesn't. It only leads to perpetuating suffering. And therefore I don't teach it. So it's both like taking a certain meaning from the data of life, what it leads to in terms of our spiritual goal and our moral goal.
This is a continuing quiz. Okay, then Joseph asks a follow-up question. He says,
Yes.
asking about the practice of the four Brahma Viharas to be supportive of jhana, specifically, I think this visualization practice.
Mm-hmm. To my understanding, certainly metta, which implicitly includes the other Brahma Viharas, is one of the foundational practices that can lead to jhana. In particular, the Bhikkhu Analayo has said on several occasions that when Westerners, or in particular our modern people, sometimes are so goal-oriented about wanting to obtain jhana and will tend to punish and criticize themselves then if they don't obtain it, and it becomes a bit of like a self-destructive loop that by being too tense or having too much desire involved in their effort at meditation, then they prevent themselves from getting what they wish for. But then the practice, the metta practice, and the compassion practice can be a softer, easier, more gentle, and much more attainable way to obtain jhana. But practicing in a way that focuses on diversity, say if you're thinking about the lovable people and the people who are in pain and suffering and the people who are having success and all the people and like that, with remembering diverse, different kinds of beings, is not the practice that Analayo recommends leading to jhana, but rather the boundless meditation. So the Brahma Viharas are taught in the sutta as a boundless practice, where one is not visualizing the particular types of beings as the target of meditation, and not, thinking about the qualities of those beings, but just simply taking these the thought of loving kindness, the thought of compassion, the thought of sympathetic joy, the thought of equanimity, and projecting them in every direction without boundaries, without limitations. And that is a practice that is supportive of gaining jhana.
Okay. And a little bit of metta in action. Looks like Laura says she has a prayer request for Kat Tolstoy, who passed away on Wednesday, and says, I will miss his personality, which will never be replaced. How do I find peace with his death? How do I know he is at peace?
Well, may Tolstoy be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to him. May no difficulties come to him. May he always meet with success. May he also have patience, courage, understanding, and determination to meet and overcome the inevitable problems, difficulties, and failures in life. May Tolstoy encounter a world where there's a possibility to hear the Dhamma, to encounter the teachings of the Buddha, and have a chance to understand the Dhamma, and to then go beyond the limitations of a cat existence into an existence which is capable of realizing the promise of this path of practice. There's a sutta called the Kanda Parita, which is particularly done towards animals and wild creatures. It starts with the snakes, the 4 different kinds of snakes, the king of the different snake kingdoms, and then it goes on to reflect about all beings with no legs, like snakes, beings with 2 legs, such as birds or humans, beings with 4 legs, such as cats and dogs and like that, and beings with many legs, such as insects. Wishing may each one of those kinds of beings receive my love. And then in the following verse, may each one of those kind of beings not hurt me. When I was dwelling in the forest and seeing how much impact the humans had on the pure natural state of the forest before we settled down there, I was particularly aware of the fact that sometimes if a small animal sees a human being coming, it's like they see, here comes Mara, here comes death coming to destroy me. And they're struck with terror when they see a human being. But if it could be that because of the way we practice and also the care and attention that we give when we live, that all of the beings would be safe around us. And then they wouldn't feel frightened when they see us. Instead, it's just, this is another being in this space. And so that they've got that sense of that safety. So Tolstoy, by having a loving parent who is a Buddhist practitioner, would certainly have experienced that kind of safety of being around a being who would not be cruel, not be hurtful, not be mean, and who is giving loving kindness. And because of having that experience of being the recipient of consistent kindness from a human, that's, to my idea, almost the best possible factor that could help Tolstoy to have a favorable rebirth, because they know what kindness is. And yes, so it may be so. Obviously, we don't know fully what else is involved, whether if Tolstoy was out, killing birds all day long, and there may be something to do to take care of that. But that's something that is in the nature of cats. So it's very good when cats can experience kindness.
Okay, let's see. And Sean has a question. Billy says that he finds himself changing career paths from direct patient care to an education position, teaching other nurses. As we have the Supreme Teacher as our inspiration and access to an endless number of inspiring teachers on this path, I was hoping you could share what qualities of the Buddha as a teacher are particularly inspiring or meaningful to you, or what qualities a teacher in general should possess. As always, thank you for your insight and guidance.
Well, we were just reflecting about the Buddha as a teacher this morning when we recalled that shortly after his enlightenment, he hesitated, knowing the difficulty in finding a being who would be receptive to receive the teaching. And that it seemed like the moral of the story that we got from that whole reflection is that for a being who is all alone in the universe with a thought of compassion, in a certain way, the true Dhamma is not arising just from that solitary being, but only when there's a listener, a student, somebody who wants to know, somebody who requests the teaching. Then the electrical circuit is completed and there's the transmission of knowledge. And it's that point that the second gem of the triple gem comes to be, that the Dhamma arises as the teaching of the Buddha. So there has to be the second for the teaching of the Buddha to exist. The Buddha was had such a compassion and sympathy for the world that he was energetic in continuously going up and down India for 50 years, constantly teaching. So having energy is one of the qualities that I see in a good teacher. The Buddha was able to shift the type of language, the type of metaphors, and the style of his teaching to meet that which could be understood by the person he was speaking to. So that was something else that's a good quality of a teacher. The Buddha very rarely criticized the beliefs that people had. there were a few beliefs that he did strongly criticize, but you have the example of the uh, uh, young man who was doing a ritual of facing in the four directions and reciting a certain mantras. And that's why, and he said, well, I'm doing it for my parents because this is what I was taught, but he really doesn't understand it. He doesn't really understand the reason. So the Buddha takes what that young man already possesses, and by adding more levels of moral content and richness of ideas and seeing how it can lead, then he elevates the good quality that that young man already possesses in his faith and his loyalty and his good intention, and raises it up to another level. So in that way, the quality of respect, I think, is really a super important quality of a teacher, that they can see the goodness in the student, or they can see the talent or the capacity, the capability in the student, and respect what's already there, and then make that the starting point or the base from which to raise them up. I would really like to know your ideas, because I think you're also going to be a great teacher.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. I think you are already a great teacher. I think that's really wonderful, that quality. I had it. They didn't come to mind, but I had reflected on it in the past, of this quality of the Buddha to take something and then elevate it. So another one that comes to mind is certain terms like the Brahmins. You may hear the Buddha talking about what is a true Brahmin. Instead of saying, "Oh, Brahmins are silly," he says, "Well, that this value for a holy person, that's good, but let's just redefine it. Let's uplift it." Or he'll say, "What is a true?" He'll take terms like someone who's cleansed, and he'll say, "Well, what's really being cleansed?" And he'll uplift it. So, like if someone has a practice of bathing, he won't say all your ideals are silly, but rather he'll say, well, what would true bathing be like? And then he kind of, that value that you mentioned, I think that is true. That's very present. And maybe what else comes to mind for me is the Buddha talks about himself as a teacher, and he says that he cultivates three satipatthanas. So you may be familiar with the four satipatthanas, the four establishings of mindfulness, the four ways of applying mindfulness or attending mindfully. And the Buddha, he has another list of 3 ways of attending mindfully. And he says that, what are the 3? He says that when he's teaching someone, if the disciple, I might please forgive me if I mistake some of the details, but the main essence is, if he's teaching someone and they don't really listen or apply it, then he establishes internal mindfulness and he's not upset by that. And if he's teaching someone and they also, maybe they listen, but they don't actually apply, they don't really practice and receive the results of the teaching, he has established his inner mindfulness and he remains content. He remains unaffected. And if he's teaching someone and they listen and they succeed in their practice, he rejoices and he's content with them. So he doesn't actually say it's equal in all 3, but he says that if someone's not listening or they're not practicing and not receiving the results, he's unbothered. He remains completely unbothered, not emotionally affected in a negative way. But if his students do succeed, he mindfully is happy with them. He's mindfully rejoicing in them. And so that is an interesting, that's the Buddha's explanation of his teaching, that when the students are, I think, as a teacher, if you are getting upset that the people are, how they're responding, or you're emotionally involved in the response of the students in an unhealthy way where you're being negatively affected, then I think we can all see how that would cause problems, right? The teacher might be exhausted, the teacher might become frustrated, or the teacher might become harsh. But on the other hand, a good teacher, as Aya Sopana was just mentioning, they have a healthy sense of uplift when the students are succeeding, and the Buddha doesn't neglect that. So he also says, like, he has a healthy sense of joy, of mudita, rejoicing for the students when they are succeeding in their practice. And then similarly, another one that relates to that to me that I find often my mind will incline to is that the Buddha wasn't teaching for any kind of personal gains, honor, or respect. So often, one of the dangers of someone maybe being in the role of a teacher who is underdeveloped is maybe a sense of pride or a sense of ego or a sense of being above the students, right? And then maybe a feeling of like, the teacher is somehow impervious to the teachings that they're giving. And then it gets mixed, it becomes corrupted, because actually they are using their teaching position as a sort of as a way to nourish the defilements. And but the Buddha was not teaching, he was completely uninterested in getting any kind of ego or gain or pride or fame because of his teaching. And there's one sutta that we studied not so long ago called the Nagita Sutta, when a group of people come outside of the monastery, and Nagita, the Buddha's attendant at the time, says, "Oh, please receive the people." And the Buddha explains, he says, "Nagita, may I never become famous. May I never become famous." So the Buddha actually didn't want to become famous. He didn't want to have a wonderful reputation. But he taught purely out of compassion. So the motivation being pure, and I find that, Isobana mentioned the quality of energy, and I think that would be connected to the compassion to my mind, because he dedicated so much time of his life teaching people. And from his perspective, we are fools. We're very foolish because we just don't get it. We just continue creating suffering for ourselves and others unnecessarily, completely unnecessarily. And he still taught us, and he still did that out of compassion, spending so much energy, not trying to get anything out of it. He wasn't looking for a good reputation. He wasn't looking to be praised. And so I think I imagine that, if you become a teacher and your students see that you just want to help them, you don't want to be revered and worshipped as the one who knows and the one who is better than them, and you apply that energy purely from a selfless place, I imagine that would be inspiring to your students as well.
I'll add just one last thought, and that is among the different taints or corruptions in the whole world, there's one that particularly applies to academia, and that is the taint of views. It is, we talked earlier about the dedication to the truth. So being in a position of authority where you have the duty to tell a group of people this is the truth, and if they want to get a good score on the test, they should feed back to you whatever you said. So then it has a real danger where then something that becomes an ideology, and then there's a clinging, and then somebody else has got a different opinion, and there gets to be a quarrel about that. So having the humility, the intellectual humility, to always know, I might be wrong, or there can be a different way of looking at it, and to always be able to welcome and to hear and to encourage different points of view without using your knowledge and your talent and your future fame as a great teacher to get into some kind of an ego trip where you're defending something. So don't do that.
Yeah, actually, maybe I can add on that one more thing. I know we're going on, but now that there's a sutta. There's a story in the suttas where the Buddha goes to the Wanderer's Park, and he goes to basically it's the ashram. So he goes to the monastery of other religions, and he comes and if I am not misremembering the details of how it happens, there's different philosophical teachers. So this is where you usually would have the debates, or you would have the people arguing over the opinions, as I was just referencing, and they ask him, oh, what is your teaching? What is your doctrine? And he says, well, let's just set that aside. What are you saying? I'm curious of what you say. And it says in the sutta that essentially they're amazed, like, wow, it's, usually when people come here, they just can't, they can't wait for the moment when they can tell us their theories. But this person comes here and they're asking what we say. They want to hear what we say first. So the Buddha had that quality of what Isobana was just mentioning, of like wanting to hear, okay, what are you saying? Yeah, and so that's another maybe inspiring quality of the Buddha in relation to that. That's a particular one.
Okay.
Okay. And then Lisa says, does Buddhism have any pantheistic influences? I want to become Buddhist, but I am a bit scared to leave my birth religion. What can you suggest? Thanks.
Pantheism is finding that the whole universe is imbued with some kind of a sacred energy, something along those lines.
Please, so I think it is. I can't remember the details of it from the other one, but yes, the idea that everything has some kind of. I think maybe the whole universe is God, or the whole universe is imbued with divinity. Yeah.
Certainly, Buddhism knows about the existence of invisible beings of many kinds. There are different types of devas and yagas and nagas and so forth that are on our plane of existence that can be seen or seen directly. For myself, oftentimes, like if you say there's a tree, and the tree is definitely alive. It's definitely responding to its environment. But I might not think that the tree itself is a sentient being, but I know that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sentient beings living on that tree and living in that tree and living around that tree, and including not only the insects and the worms and the termites and the birds and the squirrels, but then also including the devas and the other invisible beings that are within that. So there really isn't anything in the world that might be like not touched by sentient beings of some kind. There is, I think the feeling that we get when we see when we think of a sacred quality to like taking everyday life and making it sacred, or taking everything that we encounter and seeing that which is sacred everywhere, is not completely distant from having our minds imbued with the Brahma Viharas that were mentioned earlier, and making that constant feature of our own psychology, so that there's not a minute that goes by that kindness is not able to arise. And then furthermore, if we are practicing mindfulness, not only are we looking within and being very sensitive and aware with the inner process of this body and mind, but we also have got that kind of acute sensitivity and awareness to the external objects. So now, outside of me, like here, there's several faces of people who are here in the room, and so those are visual things that strike the eye, and there's a mental process of recognizing that these are people, and I also can recognize all the other objects that are around. But it's like a really paying attention, really being alive, and not blocking out. So that's not exactly the same thing as seeing that of God in all of creation. But it's something that might fulfill the same or a similar kind of a purpose.
Yeah. If there's anything-
You don't have to give up your, well, you might not have to give up your birth religion. I didn't give up my birth religion. I just added the Dhamma to it. And I wasn't, I haven't been formally excommunicated from my birth religion. And out of all the people I know, I'm one of the people who's the most appreciative and sympathetic and just grateful to my birth religion. It's not what I'm making a priority, because I find Buddhism is so much more useful and helpful for the quest that I'm on.
Yeah. I found in Italy, where mostly the Catholic people tend to be the most faithful and supportive of the Buddhist monks, because there's that appreciation of the religious practice, the religious quest. And I think likewise, I think that Buddhist monks, that we tend to be more appreciative of the Catholic renunciants and Catholic practitioners, rather than maybe the people who are no longer Catholic. Yeah. Okay, and then Joseph asks, Biko Analio says that mudita is an antidote for discontent. The Pali word is arati. It seems to be the antidote for dissatisfaction for the holy life. Please guide us in practicing joy in this way.
Yeah, rati is the meaning of delight, and arati is the non-delight or the dissatisfaction. So discontent is what keeps us like a monkey going from branch to branch, constantly looking for the next thing, never able to rest, always on the move. And contentment is something that is able to stay with what is, and able to accept and fully accept without resisting what is. I can see this particularly in the teaching about Vedana, about especially about the pleasant and unpleasant feeling. You see that within each of those two types of feeling, there is the opposite. So the pleasant feeling becomes unpleasant when it's over, and the unpleasant feeling becomes pleasant when it's over. And if one is just a victim or a puppet driven by pleasant, unpleasant feelings, that nobody's really this immature. But if you were so immature that if you feel something pleasant, you just got to get more and more, or if you see something unpleasant, you've got to throw a temper tantrum and try to chase it away. But internally, we might be that way, so that one is always nervous with the pleasant experiences. You're always thinking, oh, it's not going to last. And so you've got that anxiety around within the pleasant things. And then you've got a different kind of reactivity around the unpleasant things, which means never able to settle. But when Vedana is just like the weather, it's like there's no such thing as bad weather. If it's cloudy or sunny, if it's cold or hot, it's just weather. And you just accept all the kinds of weather, and without having a preference for one or the other, and that then becomes contentment. I don't fully actually get Bhikkhu Analayo's idea of mudita being an antidote for all kinds of discontent. I see it as a way of bringing the lift and the uplift and the brightness to our life and to our practice. So people, humans and probably mammals or many creatures are more sensitive to dangers and things that are negative and harmful. You can sense them. You've got like I don't know, in your nose you have 100 sensors for bad smells and 10 sensors for good smells, because evolution wants you to be that way. So then you got to put a little intentionality to see that which is good, to see that which is wholesome, and to pay attention to that. The Buddha said that which you think and ponder about becomes the inclination of the heart. And teaching about the two kinds of thought. And so, like within yourself or within another, if you make a point of seeing and paying attention to the wholesome dhammas that are arising, that becomes your inclination.
The one thought that comes to me from mudita and discontent is Ayasoma has this flip of wordplay that nowadays people talk about FOMO, fear of missing out. And we could call that a form of discontent, so you're maybe scrolling on social media and you see, oh, they have wonderful relationships and they eat wonderful food and they have wonderful, beautiful vacations and they have so many wonderful friends and they have wonderful furniture in their homes and wonderful seasonal celebrations, and you have none of that. And woe is me, and oh, I have horrible this, and I'm so discontent with my life. And then, but actually, if you look at it from another angle, if you have the lens of mudita, then you get what's called jomo, the joy of missing out. And so you get to rejoice in all those things. So instead of thinking, oh, they have this and I don't, they have that and I don't, their life is wonderful and mine is horrible. Instead you think, oh, they have this, wonderful, they have that, amazing, their life is wonderful, great. And so then you are actually rejoicing, so you're not discontent. And the way that one of the ideas that came to me at one point, I was having a conversation with someone, and we were actually talking not about discontent, but similar to discontent, and is imagine that you walk into an art gallery. And so an art gallery is supposed to be uplifting, right? It's supposed to be uplifting to your spirits, to see refined art and to see beauty and to see the craftsmanship of people who have developed their skills and who can express beautiful truths about the world and in life. And so if you walk into an art gallery, you can have a lot of rejoicing, like, oh, this is amazing, this is wonderful, and I'm so happy for this, and I rejoice in the goodness of this work, right? But if you have the wrong attitude, then an art gallery is a kind of a pill for depression, because you think, oh, this is wonderful, I could never make that. I'm a horrible painter. Oh, this is a beautiful sculpture, I suck at sculpting. Oh, this is such a wonderful architecture, my house is horrible, I could never do anything like that. So actually you just torture yourself if you have the wrong attitude to an art gallery. So life is like our art gallery, right? And so when we walk around life, if we think about all the things that we don't have, it's like we're surrounded by art and we only look at it in terms of how horrible we are, how we could never do that, or how we don't have that. But actually, that's not how you're supposed to approach an art gallery, right? That would be the wrong way to go. You might as well not go, because art galleries are supposed to be uplifting. They're supposed to be causes for rejoicing and beauty, not for turning the art around and how a horrible artist we are, right? So it's the same. I think that if you are discontent with life, you're kind of looking at life in the wrong way. You're looking at an art gallery as if it was showing you how you're not as good, but actually you're supposed to be rejoicing in life, and then you never have a reason not to be happy. You don't have to be discontent with your present situation, because your present situation is one of rejoicing, it's one of gladness, it's one of happiness. So there's actually nothing wrong. When you're happy, it's wonderful, right? It's nothing to be sad about. So when you're in an art gallery, it doesn't matter if you can't sculpt like Michelangelo could, because you're fulfilled, you're happy, you're rejoicing. You don't need to be discontent. But if you look at it like, oh, I could never do this, then yes, you will be discontent. So mudita would be the solution. And I think if we look at all of life like that, like, oh, I don't have this friendship. Well, actually, you don't need to be looking at other people's friendships as a comparison with yourself. You should be rejoicing and then it's beautiful, right? So to me, that's one of the ways that you might be able to put that into your practice. And I can speak, when I go on alms round, I found mudita a helpful practice because all four Brahmaviharas, reflections, I found very helpful, those reflections. But to speak on mudita specifically is that, when you're on your own alms round and you're hungry, if you're eating the alms food and you're hungry and you're standing there and all these people have all this food and you're thinking, oh, I don't have any food and they're not giving me any food, or, oh, am I going to go hungry? And so then it's horrible, right? But if you're thinking, oh, it's so wonderful, I'm so happy for you that you have this meal, that you're nourished, that you're getting ready for your day. I'm so happy that you have this food. I'm so happy that you are getting things that you like and that you can enjoy. Then actually you are not, you're nourished, right? It's like the art gallery, but with the food situation, right? So instead of thinking about what you don't have, then you're, oh, I'm so happy for you. And you think, actually, may you not lose that. May you always be happy. And so then then you don't have the attitude of like, oh, I wish that I had the food that you have, right? The jealousy, because then you're the discontent, essentially, not happy with what you have, because you're actually wishing, oh, I'm so happy for you. And you wouldn't want them to not be happy. You wouldn't want them to lose the beauty. And so that's maybe one reflection that could be helpful for the idea of discontent in mudita. Okay, and then Rick has a question. Says, Venerables, can you offer some reflections on how to prioritize life and practice as we move through the final years and months of our lives? Thank you.
And I would prioritize practice. What have you got to lose? There are interesting ways in which, as aging comes along, that one's body, of course, is changing, and also one's psychology is changing. The types of energy of what's meaningful are changing. It's in a certain way like a second adolescence, that you are just noticing that certain things are not the same as they were before. One big danger in the older years is that a person may fall into a kind of a dullness, a kind of a dull sort of a contentment, and it's really useful to keep awake, to keep the mind alive, to keep the practice going, and to take some, contemplation, active contemplation that everything that we experience is impermanent. It's constantly changing. It cannot be clung to. It's not me, not myself. Really actively do some more active forms of practice to avoid that danger. Like the external sensitivity may be diminishing, like you can't see as well as you used to, and you can't hear as well as you used to, and in a way that it's really great. In my own monastery, the neighborhood can sometimes be noisy, and sometimes the walls are thin, and sometimes somebody will be snoring or something like that. So there were a lot of complaints, and I was saying, none of these things disturb me. The thing is, I can just take out my hearing aid. I don't have to be disturbed by the noises. And so that's a way that one can become too placid. So don't be too placid. Do something to keep the energy going, to keep the sense of urgency going, and to keep the mind lively. Continue reading. It's quite important.
Sounds good. See, we have a little bit of time. Okay.
This question for you.
Let's see. Okay, so Joseph is saying they appreciated the teachings on emptiness. I'm glad that those were helpful, Joseph. Really glad to hear that that was helpful. Could you speak of the Brahmavihara with appreciation of what is absent? For example, Aveda, Avyapadhyana, Nika. Okay, well, let's see. Yeah, so for those who maybe don't know, I was talking about emptiness practice, and you can watch those videos if you're interested, because we won't have the time to talk about this particularly in detail, but that emptiness is a form of appreciation, right? Kind of similar to the concept of discontent, actually, that what is, when it's storming very heavily and then you stop and you notice the quiet, but most of the time it's not storming. That's the natural sound that's there. And actually might be louder than normal, but you've noticed, oh, it's so peaceful because you're actually appreciating something, but it's not appreciating something which is present, right? It's appreciating something which is gone. The disturbance has gone. And so similarly, when an illness passes and we appreciate that the illness is gone, actually we feel very healthy, but normally we might even be healthier, right? But actually we appreciate the feeling because we're appreciating something being gone. And so it's different from appreciating something being present. And so in terms of relating this to the Brahmaviharas here, I think maybe what comes to mind immediately is the idea of aversion towards not having things. I think kind of what we spoke about with the fear of missing out or the discontent. And instead you might notice, for example, like, maybe you feel, oh, I'm jealous, or, oh, I'm angry that I don't have this, or I deserve that. Then you think, well, actually, that would just be having more suffering, right? So you have more friends and you think, well, that would just be more chaos. Actually, it's peaceful to have a quiet life. So if you actually appreciate the quiet, like imagine that you were just with many, many people at your house, and you might even think like, oh, when are they going to leave? But then after a while, you might start thinking, oh, when am I going to have more people here? You feel lonely. So instead, you might think, well, what was it like when I was wishing that those people would leave? And then you notice that actually the mind is like this, right? That sometimes it appreciates things being gone, and then other times it's wishing that there were more things there. And so can you shift it into that mood of like appreciating actually not having the burdens of more things? And this is why the Buddha says that, for many people, the idea of nibbana is horrible. It's actually suffering. Like it would be suffering to, people would consider it horrible. Like, oh, you can't see anything, you can't hear anything, you can't smell anything, you can't touch anything, you can't taste anything, you can't think anything or know anything. So that would be horrible. But actually, the Buddha says that that's the highest happiness. It's the absence of suffering, right? The absence of suffering. And so actually the absence of suffering is something that if you come to appreciate it, you're coming to appreciate the pleasures of nibbana, the pleasures of absence, rather than the pleasures of getting things, the pleasures of having things. And similarly, when you practice generosity, you're appreciating, not having things, but actually letting things go. And so those are some reflections. Like you could maybe relate that to being averse or being jealous or being, kind of agitated or irritated or grumpy about the situation. And you could reflect like, what would it be like to view this from a different angle, view it from the angle of appreciating that it's more simple, it's more peaceful. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Only that, as I said before, that our mind is very sensitive to notice anger, to notice hatred, to notice greed, and that to see the absence of anger, the mind may not naturally be oriented to notice that. So just intentionally directing awareness to the absence of anger. What's that? Are you angry?
Not particularly.
Yeah, okay.
At this time, at least. Not that I'm free from all anger, but
Yeah, so, just intentionally directing the mind towards towards the absence of the negative factors is something that is part of right effort. Is that you want to prevent the arising of something that's not there, of an unwholesome factor that's not there. So if you notice that it's not there, that's part of the prevention.
Sounds really, that's a great reflection.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it looks like we've just reached our time, so this is perfect timing here. So apologies to the other questions which we may have missed. It looks like there weren't many, so actually we may have gotten to all of them, I wonder. Yeah, I think we actually got to all of them. So wonderful. So no, I rescind my apology. And so we wish you all have a wonderful, peaceful night. And if you come to the monastery, you'll see more teachings from Ayasobana live being offered here. And also you can follow along the videos that while she's here offering teachings. And so we have the pleasure of having a teacher like Ayasobana with us. So really encourage you to join in the future teachings with her, and also the live monastery programs if you're able. So we'll see you in the future.